This is the second part of my series on working with rolled fondant, and now we have the color that we want, so let's roll out the fondant and cover our cake. Before we get started rolling out our fondant, we're going to put a crumb coat on our cake. This should be in the refrigerator so that it's nice and firm. So I put some cornstarch down on my vinyl and then also on top of my fondant because I don't want it to stick to my rolling pin. And then I just start rolling it. It somewhat depends on how tall your cake is as to how large your circle needs to be. But we'll, before we go to put it on, we'll gauge that. And then I just want to always be making sure that my fondant isn't sticking to the surface. And I'll just keep going until this is nice and thin. It has to be a wide enough circle to fit on my cake. So I'm just going to bring my cake over. You can see how much excess fondant I have, and that's just perfect because we have to make sure that it's going to drape over the sides. I'm just going to clean some of that excess cornstarch off of my fondant with a pastry brush. I have my cake set up on a tray like this, and you can see the tray has little feet, and that props the cake up and off of the table, and you'll see in a minute when I go to trim the fondant how that can be helpful. And whenever I am picking up my fondant, I want to make sure that I'm using the flats of my hands. I never want to use my fingertips, or my fingers might actually cause a hole in my fondant. So I'm just going to slide my hands under there and lift the whole thing up like this and just bring it over to my cake and drape it right over my cake like that. Once you have your fondant draped over, we now need to get the fondant to cling directly onto the cake. So what we're going to do is just rub the fondant onto the cake very gently. You don't want to be pulling it down because then it may split at the top. So you want to just rub it very gently. And also we need to get these seams or these pleats that have been created to lay flat. As we're doing that, the fondant's going to get longer, and so we may have to trim off some of it with our scissors. And so just keep going around the top. You want to do the top, and then we'll deal with this little skirt that's created at the bottom. So just keep going around. And as you're doing that, it will sort of cling to your crumb coat that's under there. And just very gently and very slowly we'll go around the cake and just move down and sort of stretching that as we go so that it's clinging to the cake flat. And it will, as I said, it will sort of create a little pleated skirt at the bottom, and that's okay. We're just going to end up cutting that off. So as you can see, as I'm sort of stretching it and pressing it to the cake, as I'm moving around, it's getting longer and longer. And so as I'm working it, I may want to cut some of that excess off so that I can work a little bit more easily with this. And you don't want to cut too much off at one time. You want to have some excess on there. Plastic. And now with a little bit of that excess gone, this should flatten out quite nicely. So we get that right close down. Just keep rubbing it. Now I have my fondant pressed right onto my cake. And now I need to take my scissors again and trim. And this is where that plate that I had that has feet on it comes in really handy, because I can just trim along the base of that plate and get a nice flat tight edge on the bottom of my cake. And now what I want to do is really smooth that cake out. This is a really handy tool. This is a Fondant Smoother. And this, if you just rub the fondant with this, you'll end up with a really nice, smooth, shiny surface. And so just go, you know, as much as you like, depends on the finish that you're looking for. I'm gonna be covering this with some cut out snowflakes, and so I don't need to go for a perfectly smooth, but if this was like a wedding cake or something, I'd want to make sure that that surface is perfectly smooth. And now we're ready to create the decorations for the top. And just make sure that you've got all these little edges here cut out.